Today on HSC Science, we'll be covering ATP photosynthesis and cellular respiration. ATP and glucose. Cells obviously need energy in order to function, as do we. Without energy, we can't move, we can't breathe, we can't really do anything. And also, plants need it too in order to grow. And so, hence, we have two different types of organisms: autotrophs, which are organisms which make their own food, like plants, and heterotrophs, organisms which obtain energy by consuming food, like animals, and some plants, like the Venus flytrap. Glucose. This is the formula of glucose. It'll be pretty important later on, so keep this one in mind. ATP. ATP is also known as adenosine triphosphate. ATP is made of adenine, ribose, and 3-phosphate groups and is the equivalent of currency in the cell world. It's like the USD in America. In order to buy stuff, you need to have dollars or USD. You can't really expect to be able to buy anything with, say, a bunch of Indian rupees or Korean won. And so you need USD, and ATP is kind of like the USD. Of course, rupees and won are also just money, but you can't really use it in the US unless, of course, you convert it. Energy is stored in the bond between the second and third phosphate group, and energy is released by breaking the bond and forming ADP, or adenosine diphosphate. It's called adenosine diphosphate because the third phosphate group was just shot off, so now there's only two phosphate groups, hence diphosphate instead of triphosphate. Making energy, but not really, because we can't really make energy out of nothing. So there are two main methods: aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic requires oxygen, and anaerobic does not require oxygen. Photosynthesis, the method autotrophs use. And remember, autotrophs are the ones that can make their own food. Photosynthesis takes place in chloroplasts, and it uses sunlight, water, and CO2 to produce sugars and oxygen. It's a two-step process involving a light-dependent reaction first, and then a light-independent reaction, also known as the Calvin cycle. The light-dependent reaction converts ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and NADP plus into ATP and NADPH. It separates water into hydrogen and oxygen. The Calvin cycle uses the ATP, NADPH, and hydrogen produced in the previous reaction, along with carbon dioxide, in order to produce sugars. Cellular respiration and fermentation, the method heterotrophs use, or the method the organisms that consume other things or food in order to get energy. Okay, next we have the aerobic, or the method that we do need oxygen. Cellular respiration. This process occurs in the cytoplasm and the mitochondria of a cell and yields from 36 to 38 ATP molecules. It consists of 3 steps: glycolysis, which was already done and mentioned before, and the Krebs cycles, along with the electrons transport chain. So in the Krebs cycle, the pyruvic acid is broken into carbon dioxide and NADH and FADH. And NADH and FADH carry electrons to the electron transport chain, and this process produces 2 ATP. And in the electron transport chain, which takes place in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, oxygen, NADH, and FADH, is used to produce electrons, um, H, which turn into water, and 32 to 34 ATP molecules. So essentially, oxygen and glucose produce CO2, water, and energy, which is ATP. And then we have the anaerobic or fermentation, anaerobic method, which involves fermentation. After glycolysis, the pyruvic molecules stay in the cytoplasm and fermentation occurs. Glycolysis happens again, which produces another 2 ATP. There are two types of fermentation, alcohol and lactic acid. The alcohol fermentation occurs in some types of yeast, bacteria, and microorganisms. And lactic acid can be produced in some fungi, bacteria, and sometimes our muscles. Lactic acid is the thing that makes our muscles really, really sore after a workout. But imagine if our muscles made alcohol instead of lactic acid. Yeah, that would be a very interesting workout. Anyway, on that wonderful note, that concludes an overview of ATP, photosynthesis, and cellular respiration. Thank you.